Well, those notes look funny. They're all quarter notes, but they have dots in different places. That's because different places of putting a dot has a different meaning. And as a musician, you need to know what each of the dot placement means. When the dot is to the right of the note head, it's called a dotted note, and it makes the note longer. So here on the screen, we have a dotted whole note, dotted half note, dotted quarter note, dotted eighth note. The note values you see are only if we're using the common counting system. Here we see dots that are above or below the note head. In these examples, those are all staccato marks, and they mean we're going to make the notes very short and detached. And now we see dots on the left of the note head, which is never seen in real life. This is not something that we do with dots. A lot of times we'll have books that teach students about one dotted note first. I don't recommend this because if you tell kids that the dotted half note gets 3 beats, they start to think the dot always adds 1 beat. And that's not true. The dot is a variable that always adds a different amount of beats. Let's think about a pretend 100 count note. The 100 count note would get 100 counts, and if we dot it, the dot would add 50 more. So a pretend 100 note would get 150 beats. Now, if we think about a half note, we know it gets 2 beats. The dot would add half of that value, which would be 1, so the dotted half note would get 3 beats. The pretend 50 rest would get 50 beats of rest. The dotted pretend 50 would get 50 plus half of 50, which is 25, so it would get a total of 75 beats of rest. Once again, that's pretend. Quarter notes get 1 beat, the dots add half that value, which would be half, and the dotted quarter note would be worth 1 1/2 beats. In music, we do like to use fractions. Please do not say 1.5. A pretend 10 note would get 10, the dot would add half of that, which is 5, so a pretend 10 note would get, a pretend dotted 10 note would get 15. So I like to have my students work through these questions. Sometimes I do them on worksheets. Sometimes I do them, on the board together. This video is just kind of set up as a way to work through it. And I do actually have a link in the description that takes you to a Google slideshow that has all these slides, and you could use them with your students. I did dedicate one slide to the double dotted note, something that we don't normally teach in middle school and rarely in high school. If you do want to do something to elevate for your more advanced students, this is certainly something that could be done. Depending on where you live, teachers might be required to put an acceleration in every lesson plan that they create, and if so, your double dotted note is a way to accelerate. If you're being observed and you want to impress somebody on math integration, I would suggest a lesson like this. I would probably not teach something this way unless I was being observed and trying to show how I can include math. But if I need to show something more advanced with integrating math, and I ask a question like, how many beats does a dotted 16th note get? Honestly, most of us probably do not know the answer off the top of our heads, but we could figure it out with mental math quickly. However, our goal here is to include math. So we know that whenever we have a dotted note, we have the original value plus half of the original value. So the original value becomes our variable x, and that will equal the dotted value of the note. So if we want to do this as math, we would just substitute. The 16th note gets 1/4 of a beat. So we have 1/4 plus half times 1/4 equals our question over here. So we do have to do order of operations. So we do have to multiply the 1/2 by the 1/4 first. And if you want to do this to help your students the most, you would touch base with your math teacher to have all the same lingo they have. It is a great way whenever you talk about fractions to remind kids, okay, top number by top number, that's numerator by numerator. Being that you're not the math teacher, it lets you use teacher think aloud and not just make it sound like you're clueless. And then we have the denominator times the denominator. The 2 times 4 makes 8. And we still have our 1/4 from here that comes down. Now, depending on the math teacher, they might do it differently. Now you get to talk about how you have to have a common denominator. And once again, referencing with your math teachers to see how they solve it. But at this point, I would probably go mental math and be like, okay, we need to double this to make an 8. So to do that, whenever we manipulate a fraction, we have to do the same to the top and the bottom. So that becomes 2/8 plus 1/8. And then once you have the numerators and the denominators, I might do something if I was in front of students, like going 3/16 and let them tell me why I'm wrong. I would take the opportunity to review that you get the common denominator and then you just add the numerators. And our answer is 3/8.